So today, I'm going to talk a little bit about A/B testing and the tension between that and ethnography. But just to get an idea, how many people here have conducted an A/B test? Okay. How many people here have conducted an ethnography? Okay. Okay. Impressive. Very good. They're both science. And I'm going to start this morning with a story about science. It's 1898. It's in a drafty, old, you could call it a lab. It's Marie Curie's lab. She's not famous yet. She doesn't have any money, no funding. She doesn't have any money, and she wants to really understand something that came out just recently. It was the periodic table. She was convinced that she could fill in some of the blanks in the periodic table. She was going to do it. She was going to discover a new element. So what did she do? Well, she took a substance, it's called pitchblende. It was known to have uranium in it. And she put it into two piles, 100 grams each. And she put those piles in a mortar and pestle, and she ground them down. And she put water in one of them and lemon juice in the other. That A/B test led to the discovery of what we now know as polonium. That's a total lie. That is not at all what happened. No, it's not at all what happened. Marie Curie, how do I go forward? Am I stuck? There we go. Marie Curie actually did not conduct an A/B test to discover polonium. She did, however, have a drafty lab. Yes, she didn't have any money. Yes, it was 1898. Yes, she used a mortar and pestle. She actually did that. And yes, she still is the only person to have won a Nobel Prize in 2 different disciplines to this day. What she did when she discovered polonium was she borrowed her husband's new invention. He had been playing around with this thing called the electrometer, and she was using it to measure things. She wasn't sure what she was doing, and she did measure the air around pitchblende, and she discovered that it was giving off electrical signals, but more than what you would expect from uranium. Based on that alone, she published a paper where she claimed the existence not only of polonium, but also radium, which she eventually also discovered. Polonium, she got to name it because it was, her element, named after her native Poland. What happened with her long, systematic observations, her undirected generative research that she did led to the discovery, not just the discovery of radioactivity, but inventing the word radioactivity. She didn't have any idea what this thing was. Nobody did. She named it. So actual science is not what you think of as A/B testing. We think of that as science, but actually science is not just A/B testing. We are in a similar situation at this point. We have brand new tools helping us do all sorts of things, and very little basic human science as to how humans interact with these new tools. What happens when you make an algorithm to help a DJ? What happens when music itself becomes synthetic and mobile? What happens when you transfer DJ ideas into algorithms? We don't know, we don't know, and we don't know. It's very frustrating for us as researchers to say we don't know, but the truth is we don't know. At this moment in artificial intelligence and machine learning, there is a great deal that we have no computer-human interaction models for, no basic science. We have some basic science like, hey, we know that people tend to believe data when it confirms what they already believe, confirmation bias. Okay, there's an example of something we already know. But how does that relate to algorithms? We don't know. We have no idea. Science is not A/B testing. Science is generative. We know, for example, that Charles Darwin, some of us may consider Charles Darwin to be the quintessential scientist. You know him from his theory of evolution and his concept of natural selection. What you don't know is that Charles Darwin himself was pretty much an ethnographer. How did this happen? Well, he took a position as a naturalist. A naturalist, it's a weird position to have these days, on a boat called the Beagle. And it was a 5-year journey. He sailed around all over the world, famously to the Galapagos Islands. And he took detailed notes of his experiences. We would call these field notes now, or perhaps thick description. And he had no idea what he was looking for. It wasn't as if he understood specifically what is natural selection, because it didn't even exist yet. He had to invent it. So when he first published his diary, it was 751 pages in 1839. 1845, he had edited it. He re-released it. He introduced more pictures about the finches, for example. It became a bestseller. People got very excited. It was very detailed. It wasn't until much, much later that he talked about natural selection. No, in the Beagle, he was talking about the weather. It's a very Canadian example. I love this one. This is actually from from the Beagle, his voyage on the Beagle. Look how the details he's going to. He's talking about the color of the sky. He's talking about his experiences and what he would expect from if this were in England and how this differs. He gives a specific measurement. Most of us don't realize that, but ethnographers do that all the time. Specific measurements. He asks questions. He's confused. He doesn't know. He's very clearly questioning and interpreting. This is classically what you would do as an ethnographer, long before you get to the stage where you can say, this causes that, or this is better than that. You kind of do this kind of deep description. It was only much, much later, 1859, did he even use the word natural selection in the origin of the species, which is what we know him for now. It governs most, if not all, of biological research. What you didn't realize is that he took a long time to get there, much longer than most of us understand. A/B testing can be awesome, but you have to know what it is. A/B tests, they're tiny, they're specific. And so your results are going to be tiny and specific, right? So should I have this form field as required or not required? This form, this field only. This is an example of what an A/B test really actually gives us. It does not tell you, hey, what is radioactivity anyway? No, you have no idea. And given where we are in the cusp of computer-human interaction with machine learning, algorithmic intelligence, and artificial intelligence, it's very important that we understand that. You cannot A/B test your way to the basic properties of artificial intelligence and computer-human interaction. You cannot. It's not possible. We don't have enough basic science. Click. We don't have basic science. There. So science, most of us don't realize this. Science is both big and tiny, right? What is the origin of the species is a very big question, but let's say I take these fruit flies and I put them in this dark room, and I take these other fruit flies and I put them in this light room. Is there going to be a difference in how they evolve? The answer, by the way, is yes. Some of the strongest evidence we have for evolution. We didn't know any of that beforehand. We didn't know why women were dying in childbirth. We didn't understand that, and we wanted to make interventions in it. Of course we wanted to make interventions in it, but we had no idea of the basic science. There was a thing called germs that nobody had heard of before, and it turns out these germs were carrying a fever. And hey, now that we know that, maybe if we change the sheets, we're going to reduce maternal mortality. Maybe if we wash our hands. We didn't know what germs were, so we couldn't do any sort of intervention. You cannot do intervention if you don't have basic science, and basic science is essentially ethnographic, deep insight, big questions. We don't even know what humans are really bad at. Honestly, we have no idea. Why are we building all of this stuff when we have no idea what the basic value proposition is? How hard is it for people to adopt new types of technologies? Does it make sense for us to, I don't know, use artificial intelligence to guide sentencing in criminal justice? We don't know. Which one of these are technically even feasible? Actually, now this is a question that we are asking. We are asking this. Specifically here in Toronto, we've asked that for a really long time. Montreal as well, Waterloo, and obviously down in Silicon Valley, a lot of that has happened over in Tel Aviv as well. We know what's technically feasible. That is basic science. So we actually are doing some basic science around technical feasibility. What we are not doing basic science on is computer-human interaction with machine learning. We don't understand the basic science. We do not have the thick description. Much less, we can't like jump forward and say, hey, I've got these two value propositions and it uses machine learning. Which is the best one? Whoa, 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 whoa. What are you even talking about? Big science is really intimidating to a lot of people, unfortunately. But as researchers in the room, you should have a sense of mission around big. Not to lose sight of tiny, not to lose sight. If I've kind of crapped all over A/B testing, the question is, why are we doing this, right? Like, why is it so, we have such an allure for it? Well, there's a couple of reasons. The first is that it gives us this impression of proof and certainty, like the elimination of risk, right? I mean, honestly, I even wonder if Marie Curie could have published her original paper today without quote unquote proof, because she never isolated polonium ever, ever. She was never able to do it. Now we have this expectation that proof is possible. And if you have proof, then you'll be able to simply go ahead and do whatever you want because you know exactly what, you're certain. There's no risk anymore. There's another reason, and this is kind of a moment reason. Once upon a time, to get information or data from humans, you had to do it by hand, which was extremely labor intensive and quite difficult to do. Surveys, for example, paper surveys, think about that for a second. Now, we're generating petabytes of data, like all the time, constantly. I just generated petabytes just now, just by being here. So we have these data that can actually have critical mass enough that we can do things like tests of statistical significance. We can actually do that now because we have these two big piles of data and we can just mash it together. We have the technology, we can do it. So this desire to eliminate risk and this desire to have clear and understandable data sets that give us direction, that's what's happening here. Let's learn a little bit from extreme sports athletes, shall we? We think of these people as risk junkies, right? They move fast and break things, don't they? Right? Actually not. Turns out not. Base jumpers, snowboarders, etc., these people are actually not risk tolerant at all. This is a really great study I came across and I loved it. It's this qualitative interviews with extreme athletes, asking them about their experiences of risk. We believe that they're these crazy people who could have high tolerances for risk. That's actually not the case at all. What they are is ethnographers. This is actually a base jumper. He's talking about how he manages this stuff. He learns everything possible about the sport. He understands the wind, the conditions, how it moves. Doesn't this look a little bit like Darwin's diary? He does that before he jumps. He does not move fast and break shit because that's his body, right? So he actually has a little more humility and thereby reduces risk. A/B testing is actually the opposite of risk reduction. You are amping up the risk because you don't have basic science. There's basic science that we already know, absolutely, about certain things, but I would argue that most of what you and I are working on these days, there isn't any basic science. You need ethnographic. You need ethnographic insight. So how do we do this? What are the kinds of things that we can do on a day-to-day basis to kind of move past this like focus on the A/B testing? You got to recognize that risk thing, right? You got to recognize that it's actually not the case. You're not eliminating risk, you're amping it up. But what else can you do? Well, what phase are you in? Maybe you're actually early on in your product cycle, in your invention cycle, in which case you ask some really, really big questions. Early phase means early questions. And I actually did this when I was working on the Echo Look. Hey, how do individuals react to machine learning-based style recommendations? That is not an A/B test. Now, I did do an A/B test relating to that, but I also didn't lose sight of the basic science. If you're early, you need basic science. Maybe there's something missing. It's hiding. It's right there. You can almost see it. But nobody talked about it. So when I was at Microsoft, for example, and I was building productivity apps, hey, guess what, guys? Does anybody know what productivity means? What? Nobody knew what it meant, and that was an opportunity. So that was my research agenda all along. I actually did do A/B tests then too. But I also went back to the basic science. What is productivity? Is your change big, or is it tiny? It's possible that you're actually doing tiny things on a day-to-day basis. Absolutely, by all means, do an A/B test. But if you're doing something big, amp up the level of data collection, make it a 750-page diary over time. These are the things you need to ask yourself. Where are you? I've kind of told you that A/B testing doesn't work and it doesn't help you at all, but actually that's not entirely true. Some of you may know her by her nickname, the most beautiful woman in the world. This is Hedy Lamarr. Hedy Lamarr was a 20-year-old Austrian actor living in Vienna with her 30 years her senior husband, who was an arms dealer for the Nazis. She hosted a lot of dinner parties for the Nazi elite while he was trying to make deals, sell them weapons. And she really hated the Nazis. So she decided to leave. And she did. She made her way to France. She got on a ship. While on the ship, she met Louis B. Mayer, who you may know as the famous movie producer. And Hedy's plan came to fruition. She was now signed to his studio, and she had now landed her day job. That's right, her day job. Hedy Lamarr was a movie star, but her night job was A/B tester. Hedy Lamarr was unusual for movie stars, many movie stars, much less women at the time. She had a room in her house in Hollywood with doors that closed, and it was her invention room. And she enjoyed herself back there. She would A/B test all sorts of things. She made different kinds of makeup. She invented a new kind of Kleenex, which actually didn't do so well because I'm still using the word Kleenex. But she did all sorts of A/B testing. And one of those A/B testing yielded something quite incredible, something we're all using right at this minute, Wi-Fi. Hedy Lamarr invented Wi-Fi. And here it is. This is her patent. You can see there's her name right there, and her colleague, her collaborator, who was a composer. How did she do this? Well, this patent is actually for frequency hopping. She invented this system. She A/B tested her way to this system based on a player piano. So the idea that the player piano could shift songs and keys, she used that metaphor to help shift frequencies. So Hedy, remember, Hedy hated the Nazis, and she was an Austrian, so she really wanted to prove her patriotism to the United States. So she invented this in order to help torpedoes stay undetected for longer and therefore be more likely to hit their targets. She gave this to the Navy. She gave it to the Navy. I mean, she's still, you know, her name is still on the patent, but the Navy owns this. And there you have it, A/B testing success. No, that's also not what happened. She did give it to the Navy, and she did actually, you know, invent Wi-Fi. But the Navy, when they took it from her, they had no idea what this was. She tried to explain it to them. They didn't get it. They had no idea. They didn't have basic understanding of what frequencies were necessary, not much less frequency hopping, and what does a player piano have to do with a torpedo, and I don't get this. They sat on this for 40 years. 40 years. Before they finally figured out, hey, you know, this whole like shifting frequency on a regular basis, but in predictable, but unknowable, but knowable ways, that's actually a really good idea. I bet you we can use that for something. Hey, what's this thing called Wi-Fi? That's what Hedy did. She invented this. She A/B tested her way to this. So when we think about what Hedy was able to do, she used A/B testing, and she introduced this concept that was foreign to this Navy. And she managed to kind of invent something amazing, but it took 40 years to get there. Why? Why did it take 40 years to get there? Well, because like everything that we all are doing, which we know, right? We know everything that we're doing is embedded with humans and human experiences. And so when you have humans and human experiences, there's going to be confusion. There's going to be people who say evolution is a lie. There's going to be people who don't believe Marie Curie did this without her husband. There's going to be people who don't believe that polonium exists because it was never isolated. Well, eventually it was, but she never did it. Humans need conceptual understandings. They need validity. They need these concepts clearly spelled out for them. And this is actually the real purpose of ethnography. This is what ethnography does, is it makes things plain and understandable, conceptually consistent. So my challenge to you as researchers is to not buckle and just do A/B testing all the time. By all means, do A/B testing, because it is actually your responsibility to be scientific, systematic and scientific. But you should also come up with your 750-page diary. You should publish it. Even if you think nobody's going to read it, you should publish it anyway. Internally, externally, whatever, because it might be a runaway bestseller. The thing that Hetty knew was that you can hack your way to something. The thing that Hetty didn't know was that it was really incomprehensible. Marie Curie knew this, Charles Darwin knew this, Hetty eventually learned this too, so I would encourage you to be a little more like Hetty in some ways. Go ahead and A/B test, but don't quit your day job. Thanks.